right now. We're going to attempt, let me hit the continue button on this. We're going to attempt to demonstrate using a specific piece of technology that may keep the audience, you, engaged a little bit more. And so what I'd like you to do, if you can, if you're on a computer, open up a new tab and go to joinpd.com and type in that passcode that you see there. I'll also just give you a quick link. Actually, are you seeing my screen? I'm not sure. I'm not seeing the little green bar around it. So
yes,
you are seeing it. Okay. Oh, good. So joinpd.com. I just sent a link in the chat of this Zoom session as well. And the password or the little passcode is ZSOVTT. So get started on that if possible while we're introducing ourselves. If you're on a cell phone, then obviously you won't be able to do this. You'll need a web browser to do it. But if you're on a computer, you can create a new tab, do that, move that over. Or if you have your cell phone, you can just get your cell phone out and go to a web browser and join pd.com as well. I know CTL did a little training on Pear Deck specifically a few weeks ago. So anyway, I'll introduce myself first as you guys are trying to log in there. I've got 3 students connected already, so that's great. So like Terry said, my name is Huck Stewart and I'm a learning designer. I've been here at Dixie State University for 2 years as a learning designer. So in that role, I help faculty develop, design, create, active, meaningful, engaging courses, activities for an online mostly setting. And before I was here at Dixie State University, I taught at the school district here locally, at Washington County School District. I taught mathematics at the 7th grade level for 7 years. And so while I was teaching, I got my master's degree at Utah State as a learning designer. And I have my wife is actually on the Zoom session today. Her name is Liz. And 2 of my daughters are going to be listening in on this Zoom chat as well today. So don't swear at me or anything. And then I also have a son who's in 1st grade. So that's a little bit about me. Sarah, I'll let you take over for a bit and introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah. As mentioned, I'm both faculty and chair of our department currently. I have been at DSU since 2012 and have really enjoyed my time here. I teach dance technique and improvisation. This semester, I'm also teaching dance history, and I've taught integrated studies, not integrated studies, sorry, integrated arts in the past, which is a GE course. And I've taught our Dance 1010, which is also a GE course. And a course that I'm working with Huck right now to develop as an online option, which if you would have asked me about that a year or 2 ago, I would have said, there's no way we can do that course as an online option. So it's been really cool to see how we're able to develop that. I went to Cal State Long Beach for my master's in dance. And prior to that, I spent some time performing and choreographing and teaching up in the Bay Area. I have my husband of about 10 years and we don't have kids yet, but we do have 2 dogs that are spoiled a lot. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. So this first part's going to be, we're going to be co-teaching, but we kind of split it up into 2 different parts. So if you're just joining us, welcome. And just know that we are going to make this presentation a little bit more interactive, give you an opportunity to type in responses as questions are popped up and click on links throughout the presentation. In order to interact with that today, you need to go to joinpd.com and type in ZSOVTT to enter the class code. You can do that on a web browser on your desktop, new tab, or you can also do that on your cell phone. So we'll go ahead and hit the start class. The links are in the chat. And if you cannot participate with the interactive tool, Pear Deck today, that's fine. You'll still be able to see the presentation. And of course, you can still interact with us. You can unmute your microphones and you can speak to us. You can also answer the questions that we posed to you today via the chat in the Zoom session. So there's 3 different options for you to interact and engage with the presentation today. It would be kind of silly of us to try to create a presentation on active learning and not attempt to make this as active learning as possible. So I hope we don't fail at that regard, but I feel pretty excited about this today. All right, so you should be seeing this first page here. And the question I pose to you, I want you to consider this, think about it, write it down, type it in a response, join in the Pear Deck or in the chat, or just even unmute yourself and let us know. But the questions I want you to consider are, what does it look like when a student in your course or in another course is actively learning? And of course, what does it look like when a student is not actively learning? Like, what is active learning in your mind? And what is not active learning? Just 2 examples, just be as descriptive as possible. And I'll just give you like 45 seconds or so to think about it, write about it, and then we're going to have you share it if possible. Once again, you can post it in the Zoom chat. You can post it here, right? If you've joined us today, you can actually answer the question and join Pear Deck or in Pear Deck. And of course, you can always unmute yourself. So. We've got several responses up here already, and feel free to continue bringing them in. If you didn't have a chance to type it down, unmute yourself and let us know what you think. But I'll just kind of scroll down and maybe Sarah, if you notice any that stand out to you, we can address these specifically. But active learning individually or in groups. So we think about like active learning groups. That's really cool. Passive listening, watching, kind of what you're doing today. Are you guys active yet or not? It's a good question. That's good though. I like that. Engaged. Those are key words here. Asking questions, seeking feedback. So I guess this is a little more active, right? We're seeking your feedback, trying to get you engaged a little bit, trying to invest you into the presentation today. Okay. So not submitting assignments, not active. Okay. So this would be like passive learning, probably like 2 different examples here. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of common threads here, a lot of common language. Engaged is a big one. Engaged. Body language, open direct. Okay. And we just asked this question generally. Now, as we go into this day, we are going to be thinking about this in the lens of an online course, right? Like, how do we make this happen in an online setting? That's the big question here. But it's important for us to understand what active learning is. So not active learning is sitting and texting. So you have students in your class that just sit and text their friends or their loved ones. Yep.
Sleep.
What was that, Sarah?
Sleep, falling asleep.
Falling asleep, yep. That is definitely passive learning. They're actively doing something, but they're definitely not learning at that time, right? This is good. I like just seeing guys' responses here. I'm not seeing any in the Zoom chat, which is fine. Did anybody feel like they wanted to share additional examples here that weren't mentioned? The very common Zoom cricket sound. All right. If that is the case, we can continue on. I appreciate you thinking about this. My job today in this first part of the presentation is to jump in and just help us try to identify and define what active learning is. This isn't going to be groundbreaking, and so we won't be spending too much time here. The goal is to get us to a point where Sarah will take over, and we're going to actually jump into a workshop where you guys will be discussing specific challenges and issues in your online course related to active learning, or your traditional course, if that works as well, and give you a bunch of tools that you might be able to use to come up with new ideas to make your course more engaging and more active. So that is our goal today. All right, here you go. Trick question. Which of the following A, B, C, D, E, F, G is the best example of an active student, an actively learning student? The students that listen to a lecture, student reading a chapter in the textbook, writing a report, creating a 3D model. Which one's the most active? Which student is actively learning? This is a trick question, right? Because it's kind of a stupid question actually. But I wanted to pose it anyway to get you thinking about this. What does active learning actually look like here? Okay, and as you're clicking through this here, you kind of see the different responses. And I like seeing this, come up alive as you're interacting with this. If you're not able to interact with this, you can still just kind of think about it. Post a letter in the Zoom chat, or just make your symbols or whatever, like A, B, C. I don't know. I don't have sign language, but So as you're looking at this, and the reason I wanted to say this is a trick question. I don't know who answered what here, and so I'm not calling out anybody, but active learning basically can be any one of these. And I say can be, right? Because it's not implied. Like if a student is listening to a lecture, it could be that that student is actively learning, but it could also be that that student is not actively learning. And so this is the big point I want to make before we move on and start talking about anything else, right? You can be actively listening. You can be actively learning while reading. That is a possibility. But if that is the case, right? Like if a student is listening to your lecture, right? Whether it's on a video, like if in an online course, if you've recorded a video of yourself delivering a lecture or a micro lecture, or if you ask your students to read chapter 3 in the textbook before the quiz this Friday, how do you know they're actively doing those things versus just passively doing those things? They may still do those things, right? But like, how do we know? What is the difference? So again, I pose a question to you and I want you to think about it and I want you to respond. Think of your own examples and your own expertise. It is likely that you all know, as much about active learning as any one of us that are presenting today. So what is the difference between actively listening versus passively listening? Like, what does that look like for a student who's listening to your video or listening to your lecture, who's actively listening or passively listening? Like, what's the difference there? And again, we got a few responses coming in. I'll give you just a second to think about that. And again, I'm going to invite you to unmute yourselves if you want to ask or you want to answer specifically vocally. I know that's a bit, hard for some of you or whatever. I don't enjoy unmuting myself in a presentation, but feel free to post it in the Zoom chat, unmute yourself and tell us what you think, or just type it in this Pear Deck presentation today. I'll give you a few more seconds to respond as you're thinking about it. I can see that 10 of you responded. Feel free to continue responding if you're in the middle of it. I'm going to show those responses now. So let's just pick out a few. So active is responding to questions and discussion topics and staying on topic. Passively listening would be measured later. Okay, so I'm actually seeing your writing in real time. That's kind of cool. Based on comprehension and displays of understandings. Okay, I'll let you finish that. Somebody's still typing that. So active learning, taking notes, filling out a study guide. Okay. Asking questions. I love that. Those are good examples. Let me just scroll down a little bit. Yeah. Taking notes, listening more than just listening, engaging in some way. Yep. Yep. And hopefully we'll give you some tools today to be able to address that. Many of you may already know what this looks like. Okay, here we go. We got a little bit more going on the top one there. Fake listening, pseudo listening. What whoever wrote that, do you feel like expanding a little bit on that? Like, what does that mean to be fake listening? Does that just mean
on that? That was me.
Yeah.
So sometimes we do it too in meetings, where you want to pretend that you're listening. You want to show that you're listening, but you're not really technically listening.
Yeah.
And so you demonstrate nonverbal cues that show that you're listening, like nodding your head, making eye contact, but you're kind of glazed over a little bit. Yep. Maybe looking like you're taking notes, but you're really doodling, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's even easier to do that in a Zoom session, isn't it? Like we've all sat in meetings where we're like, I've got a screen over here. I can work on some extra work, or I can text my wife. As long as they can see me looking at the screen, they think I'm listening. But yeah, I'm fake listening. I'm pseudo listening. I love that. Let's see. Did anybody want me to address there specifically that they really liked? I kind of just skipped through them quickly, but I agree with what I'm reading here. I like it. I like most of it, I should say. Okay. All right. So yeah, there are certain components in active learning that we have got to do and we've got to accomplish in an online setting as well to make this happen, right? It's not just going to happen because we tell them, hey, read this chapter because it's going to be on the test next week, right? Like that doesn't guarantee that they're going to be actively reading or listening to your online videos or participating in your synchronous Zoom sessions. It's just not, there's no guarantee. So how do we make this happen? So I like this just as a quick example. Like here's some non-examples, right? And this is exactly what you said before. This is stuff that's not active learning, okay? And I do want to bring in CTL for just a little bit. Hi, Amy. And you don't have to say anything. I'm not gonna put you on a spot, but on their website, right? Just pulling this from their website, this is their definition of active learning. And I will read it out loud, even though you all can read. Active learning is an instructional method that engages. There's that word engage that most of you put in your definition on page 1. It engages learners in the learning process by requiring learners to do meaningful activities and think about what they're doing as opposed to passively listening to an expert. It emphasizes higher order and critical thinking, application of knowledge, metacognition, and often involves collaborative work, group work, and experiential learning experiences. So I highlighted those two words, engages and meaningful, on purpose. And I love that definition. So thank you, CTL, for setting us up that way and providing that all these resources for all faculty here at the institution to learn from. So engage, I just wanted to show this as well. Here are the definitions of engage. And I think these are key, right? Occupy, attract, involve, participate, become involved, meaningful. There's that word meaningful again. We're going to talk a lot about meaningfulness today. And then this comes from our OTC course. So Terry Brandenburg is one that facilitates the OTC course. Many of you have participated in that. So D. Fink says that active learning involves doing and observing and information and ideas and reflective dialogues, all these things, right? This isn't groundbreaking. You all know this. So having this information is going to be helpful for us. Here's some action verbs that we like to use as well to think about, like here, if these students are doing these things, it is very likely that they are actively learning, right? Which is why I'm asking you guys to write about this, right? Like in this presentation today, I'm hoping that you're a little bit more actively learning just by the nature of being required to write about something and share your thoughts. Instead of just sitting there behind a screen, whether you have your camera on or not, you can still participate and you can still have a voice here in this presentation. And that's intentional. We're doing that on purpose. And I'm sure you're picking up on that. So we're going to move on. That was the presentation portion of it. Okay, we're going to move on to part 2, and I want to turn the time over to Sarah to continue on.
Yeah, so I think if identifying needs in your own courses. So I can jump in with some examples, but maybe if you would please have some responses, either writing as you've done through Pear Deck or in the chat, or you can just speak as well. And then I'm happy to talk about some of the more active and passive that I've seen.
It's got 5 responses coming in. If you're joining late, just so you know, if you go to joinpd.com, the code is just right over here. You can always join in and engage in the conversation today. We're going to get to a point where we are going to do a workshop and break you up into groups, at which point you'll actually all be unmuting yourselves and having small discussions. So, oh, good. Nobody jumped off when they heard that. So, so I'll share some responses, Sarah, and then you can.
Okay.
Some people are still typing, so.
So homework, reading assignments, that feels more passive.
Yep.
Passive reading assigned course material, listening, watching a video, reading a chapter prior to class.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, explore the key theoretical and conceptual information that is basic and foundational to the content. Direction of the course, sets up Q&A during discussion and application.
The videos, the student mentioned specifically videos here. Beginning of class.
And some things with reading in the textbook sometimes, and I'm sure many of the things that I'm saying, that Huck's saying, you guys know. So, but I think in terms of making something more active, like reading, having evidence, having them show evidence of active reading, summarizing a paragraph, or responding to questions or prompts. I know sometimes in terms of an online format, if you have students zooming in, it can be easy for them to turn off their camera, or even if they don't turn off their camera and they're just crickets.
Yep.
And so I think that the tools that Huck is sharing today allows for everyone to participate in a different way. And I think that's another thing in terms of trying to promote active learning, is involving as many different platforms or ways to engage as a student can help set you up for more success.
Yeah. So I would encourage you to keep these kind of challenges or issues in mind, right? Because those are the ones that are going to drive what we do for the rest of the workshop today. Are you ready to move on to the next one, Sarah?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what does active learning look like? And so we have these 6 different kind of components that we've identified here. So making course content and activities meaningful and authentic to their careers and lives. And what I would like to do in these examples is pull from this Dance 1010 online course that we're building. And so when we think about how do I make this Dance 1010 a GE dance course that it's being delivered online? How do I make this content meaningful to these students when they likely aren't a dance major and maybe initially don't have a lot of interest in dance? And so through these different ways of engaging with the material, we have various modules, and one of the models of the module that's repeated is the different topics that we look at. So for example, if we're looking at Indigenous dance, they'll do reading prior to viewing a lecture that I'll record and speak over, like slides. That also includes videos. And then they take a short quiz at the end of that. But then they also have, along with this, we do a dance day. So then the students are actually actively engaging with the movement material. And we've set it up so that they can do a synchronous Zoom where we're all dancing together. I'm in the studio, they're in their living room or whatever. Or if that doesn't work for them because they're taking this course online, we'll record that video session and then they can go and participate later, and then they just have to film themselves doing that. And then after that, they write a brief reflection on the experience of engaging with the dance material. So in that way, I think it makes it more meaningful, because I think it gives them a greater appreciation for the dance and the kinds of maybe social dance that they do, as well as dance and that they see done professionally. Do you want me to go on to the next one, or do you want to take the yellow one, Huck?
I'll take the yellow. No, you go on and do the other 2, and then I'll do the last 3. Yeah.
Okay. This provide a variety of ways for your students to interact with the content. That basically speaks to what I already just talked about, right? So if it is a synchronous session, providing opportunities to give that feedback in a variety of ways or through a variety of platforms. Creating opportunities for students to collaborate with peers and professionals. So again, going back to this Dance 1010 class we're creating, one of the projects of the class when it's taught face-to-face is a world dance group project. And so students get into groups of like 4 or 5, and they identify a dance that they want to learn. So let's say it's hula. And they do some research about the background, and they learn a hula, and then they would teach it to the class. So Huck and I spent a lot of time figuring out how can we do this in an online setting. So we were able to get pretty creative, and we're going to set up like a discussion board, and then students can opt to make suggestions, or I'll have a list that they can of suggestions that they can choose to do for their dance. And then they can meet up in their own Zoom sessions to learn the dance. They'll film themselves doing the presentation of the dance that then they'll post to a discussion board, and then other students will be able to view their presentations and submit some reflective responses to me, so that I know that they viewed the presentations. In terms of collaborating with peers and professionals, I think opportunities to bring in guest artists or guest instructors, whether that's in your face-to-face class session or through Zoom. We've had several instructors join our dance classes, our dance technique classes throughout this past year via Zoom. And so that's been fun to see them teaching our students from their living rooms and whatnot.
Yeah, kind of related to that one. Like there's one course I worked on that was in theater. It was a theater appreciation course, so the students weren't required to act. But in an online setting, it would have been easy enough for us to just create a theater course that taught about like the history of theater or like the components of theater. But this particular theater teacher wanted students to experience and appreciate theater. So even in an online course, he required that these students, at least one time in the semester, attend a live theater performance. They had to do a critique and write about it, right? But like, they're an online learner, but no matter where they are, hopefully they can have access to some kind of theater experience and write about it. That is active and meaningful, engaged learning. And yet they're still an online student, right? And so I like that kind of thing. And I also have one more example in this. I know that was Sarah's, but there's another professor that's working with a lot of medical students, and those students, as an online student, they have to actually have a specific connection with a specific medical professional who then they do specific medical things in front of, and that person signs off for them. So like they're an online learner, they're an online student, and yet they're still like making connections with like a professional in their career. And I mean, what activity could be more meaningful and authentic than actually doing the job, right? Like getting in there and doing it. Now, does that work for all courses? Maybe not, I don't know, but I think it's important to like kind of widen our vision and really think outside the box here. Just because they're an online student does not mean that everything they do has to be confined within a screen, right? And that is really, really important. I want to go over these last 3 here just quickly. I'll give you a few examples. Give your students a variety of ways to have a voice, like this presentation. Give you guys an opportunity to unmute yourselves and talk to us, which as of so far has only happened one time. But also give you an opportunity to write about things or reflect on it some way. And so I think that's important to do. We have a learning designer here that also teaches the course, Ethan, and we were just listening to some of his students tell us why they like his discussions or why they like his course generally. He has discussions in his online course. These students have an opportunity to either participate in a discussion via a live Zoom session, or if they can't make it because they're online learners and they're not confined to a time frame, then they can always engage in the discussion later on in a traditional campus discussion format. And those students have options, right? Either way, they get credit for participating in discussion, but they must do one or the other. And those students are given a choice. So giving students a variety of options in an online course really helps them. Some students really like that face-to-face interaction, even though they're online, while others would much prefer to just get it done, type it, and move on with it. But if they had that option, how great would that be? The next one is actually a really simple method that addresses some of the major concerns in the previous page. You mentioned that reading and watching videos, a lot of you mentioned this, right? Like reading the textbook or watching videos, that's when you're most concerned about passive learning. Like that's occurring most often. And so using graphic organizers or guided notes, that's what, or reflection journals, and requiring that for the students to do, even, yes, when they're watching a video or when they're reading a chapter in a textbook, actually promotes active learning. And yeah, thank you, Tara. Variety is key. So the example I have here is I worked with a chemistry professor who created her entire course via micro lectures. And so that was important. She took her lectures that would have been like 20, 30 minutes long, and she broke them into logical chunks that were around on average 6 minutes long. And that was key. First of all, if you want your students to watch your videos on Canvas, you've got to keep them short. Studies show that's no more than 6 minutes. If your videos are more than 6 minutes long, you'll start losing them and they will not complete the video lectures. And so micro lecturing, chunking them out, that's first. But the second thing she decided to do was provide for them a study guide that they had to fill out and draw pictures of and draw diagrams on as they watched her videos. And just right there, just by nature of having that requirement, that expectation, forced them to actually do the things that she was telling them she wanted them to do. She didn't want them to just listen to the video. She wanted them to actually like write the little chemistry diagrams and the little atoms and the little models. You wanted them to do that with her as she's doing the video, right? And now it seems maybe it feels a little elementary to do that, right? Like, oh, here's your study guide, you know, but these learners, these online learners need to be taught how to learn, right? And we know that works. And so it's a really nice way to do it, a little graphic organizer. The last example that I have, be intentional about your time and goals, the alignment and the learning outcomes. This is the big thing for us as learning designers. Jordan's here with us today. He's also a learning designer. And the big thing, if you ever work with us, you'll know that if we're helping you with a project, with a whole course development or design, the first few weeks minimum are going to be just talking about your objectives, your outcomes of the course, and helping you figure out how to make those aligned, because we want everything to be intentional. We want everything to be meaningful. And so if you just say, hey, look, I want my students to read chapter 3 and then I want them to take a quiz on it. Well, I'll ask you like, well, why? Is that quiz important? Why are they taking the quiz? Why are they reading this chapter? Well, it's important because they need this, this, and this. Oh, okay, well, cool. Now that we've identified that, let's really like double down on that idea. Let's double down on like what's important here. Does the quiz help the students show achievement of what you really want them to come up with? Maybe yes, maybe no, but we challenge that, right? Like we always think about it. We think about this critically and intentionally. Everything in your course needs to have a specific and intentional meaning and value to it. That goes back to the whole meaningful thing. If students are seeing your quizzes and they don't correlate with the chapters, they're not going to read the chapters anymore because it doesn't help them on the quiz anyway. And so that's very important to make sure things are aligned and matching up. Before we move on, what questions do you have on any of these examples? Any follow-up questions? Feel free to type in the chat.
Yeah, Sarah and Huck, this is Shan Gubler. I need to leave now. I just didn't want to show that I was rude or anything. I just need to get to another commitment. Thank you.
That's very kind of you to say that. I appreciate that, Shannon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
See you.
You do have a couple questions in the chat as well.
Yeah.
Dylan?
So I was thinking about the Krista's question. If a student resides in a very rural place, I think in terms of reaching out for like an interview assignment, that's one thing where Zoom and other video conferencing could be really helpful and useful. I think in terms of requiring a performance attendance, it's not going to be the same, obviously, as going into a theater or another kind of performance venue and engaging with something in that way. But if you can provide links to videos of things, I'm trying to think. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, Chris, that's an excellent question. And that was one that was brought up with the professor when we suggested this activity. In the end, he did have a contingency plan and he had subscribed to a specific theater website that gave him access to live theater recordings. And so he held that And he made sure that students knew that if they were not able to make this happen, to reach out to him and he would help them with that. And there were a few students who had to take advantage of that specific, here's a link to an actual performance. It's not going to be the same thing, but at least you'll still have as close of an opportunity as you possibly can, considering your situation, your circumstances, where you live. Does that, and really it's like, that's a very specific example, but yes, when you're in an online and you're requiring this thing, you either need to make it very clear up front that this is a requirement that you must do. And if you cannot do it, this may not be the best course for you, or you need to come up with a contingency plan. You need to come up with like, and I can give you one more example. For respiratory therapy, I'm working with a professor who requires the students to actually get their hands on a respiratory therapy machine, and they have to demonstrate using it properly and analyzing the data properly. Well, what if a student can't get access to a machine? He has a virtual, and we're just happening to be fortunate enough to find something like this, but there's an online virtual respiratory training thing that we can have students do. It's not as cool as the real thing, so we'd rather them just do it the real way. But you know, for those students who just can't get access to it, then well, that's fine. Here's a link. You know, download the software, install it, and then you're going to have to record yourself, screencast or whatever, doing it instead. And again, two very specific examples, but yeah, you kind of do have to think a little bit more creatively, Chris, and everybody, you know, about how we're going to make that technology work for everybody if they don't live near something that they can experience. So that's a good question. Sarah, did you have anything else to add on that specific question?
I not that I can think of.
Yeah, so let's go to Dylan's question. I'm trying to see you. Hi, Dylan. Is the evidence about how those short videos are presented, like if you have 5-6 minute videos on the same page? So yes. So I should look at that and actually like share with you that information. So I'm going to just kind of speak to you based off of what I understood, and then maybe I can find that information to back it up later. But what I understand it to be is that even if there are several videos on a page, let's say you take your lecture that's maybe traditionally 20 minutes and break it into 4 or 5 minute videos, students are going to be more likely to complete each one of those separately, right? So you're going to like break them into logical pieces. And that way, because an online learner is different, right? Like an online learner isn't going to sit and dedicate 50 minutes to a course all the time, right? Like if I go to your course live, I have to sit here and listen to you no matter what, right? I don't have to, obviously. But if I'm an online learner, I may only have 10 minutes right now. And if I see I've got 4 videos here, I know I can watch 2 of them before I got to go to work or before I got to go pick up the kids or whatever, right? So like these online learners have a different mentality, and they break up their learning throughout the day. And sometimes they do it all at once as well, right? And they just sit and knock it out. But now they can see and they can complete what they can when they have the time. So yeah, that's my experience and my understanding. Did anyone have anything to add to that? Experiences with chunking videos out versus doing full lectures? It's a good question though, Dylan. I appreciate that.
And Dylan, it's always a good idea to maybe, if you have a question about something, have one of your peers or a fellow faculty member or a learning designer take a look and see if they would offer any suggestions for how you might organize that for students.
Yeah.
I have one other example, Huck, and there are creative ways that you can organize these videos. For example, this semester I'm trying in another course, this particular thing is a practice test. And so it has kind of a lecture part before it, but then the professor has gone through and given like a demonstration of how to answer these questions correctly. And so we're putting those in the feedback of the quiz. So they have to take the quiz, they have to submit their answer. And then in the feedback for the quiz, they see a video demonstration by the professor of how to do it correctly. So that'd probably be a better way of breaking that up. Whereas before we had it just as one long video going through the entire practice test. So you can be kind of creative in where you put the videos and how you organize them and segment them to make it better, to give the students a better chance to actually watch and gain more from those videos.
Yeah, kind of showing it different ways, having to interact with it different ways. Jordan, thank you so much. I like that. So Chris, another good question here, kind of addressing the text as well. So like reading the text. And we've all tried this, right? Where it's like, okay, here, you're going to want to read this text. And so I'll make a quiz about it so that like you have to answer the questions. So maybe you're more motivated to complete the text. Let's see. So I'm just going to read the question if you're not seeing it. So do you have any tips to encourage the reading of a text? I have had quizzes that match it, but they seem to just guess at the answers at the time and don't read because of this. They can lose some context in other learning, and that's absolutely true. So I'll kind of share what my experience or what I've seen other teachers do. And then Sarah, I want you to jump in as well. Anybody else can jump in at this point. We will be having one more section where you guys are gonna break up into groups and talk about things specifically, but we're here, so we might as well talk about it. So what I've seen, so again, those graphic organizers where you're requiring students to answer specific questions or write down specific thoughts or do a reflection on a specific chapter. And yes, requiring them to turn it in. Does help at sort of kind of guiding their learning through the chapter. And so I would encourage you to consider using something like that, even for chapters. I think that there's one course I'm working on specifically where the teacher has a quiz per chapter, but in addition to that, students are going to turn in a reflection journal and they have to answer the 3 questions. What is one thing they learned from the chapter that they hadn't learned before? What is something that they still have a question on from this chapter? And how can the content from this chapter apply to their upcoming career, specific career or whatever? So trying to get them to think about application and then think about like specific questions. Now, what this teacher is planning to do with this in an online course is once the students submit this little document with just answering those 3 questions after they read the chapter, they can go and take the quiz. That teacher is going to read through these and see if she can find common themes, right? Like, are there common questions that are happening in this that people are missing in the chapters? And so just by doing this, by nature of like doing this and then making an announcement or a video post the next week about the questions that they have posted in their little reflection journals, they're going to realize pretty quickly that A, you read their stuff, and B, the stuff that they're learning is important and you're trying to like help like teach them through it and coach them through the learning process of reading a text or reading a chapter. And I feel like that should help. Like that's just a specific example, but I feel like that goes a long way. The second thing I've seen is that there's one teacher who, instead of saying read chapter 1 or read chapter 2 and then take the quiz, whatever, they're saying, hey, look, in chapter 1, there are 4 specific pages that I really want you to focus in on. And while you're reading these 4 pages, it's a 10-page chapter. You're welcome to read the whole chapter, but here, the 4 pages, these are the most important pieces. I want you to think about question A, B, and C while you're reading them, because that's what you're going to be taking. That's the information that's going to be on the quiz later. If you just identify that for them up front, it automatically generates a very specific focus on what you know is the most important thing. And one of the biggest pitfalls we have as teachers is that we rely too much on publishing textbook companies. And I know you're going to, maybe some of you are members of those, right? Or have written for textbook publishing companies. But if we rely too heavily on them to guide our instruction, then students don't see any value in it. We are the professionals. We know the content, right? We need to tell them what's important. So yes, read all of chapter 1 if you want to, but these 4 pages, that's what I'm testing you on, because that's what's important, because I know what I'm talking about as the expert, right? The textbook's great. There's nothing wrong with the textbook, but then they're going to be focused on what's the most important thing. Just being judicial about that goes a long way at kind of encouraging more reading specifically. Sarah, did you have anything to add to that? And Chris, did I help at all? I hope that answers questions. And maybe okay, thank you. Yeah, so you're responding. Cool, thank you. Sarah, anything to add to that?
No, not really that I can think of. I think having some kind of written response where instead that can eliminate the guessing of answers. And we could get ebooks and load.
Yeah, so Chris mentioned, yeah, and that's like, I mean, think about like, you've all heard OERs before. We've been kind of encouraged to explore the open education resources where maybe we borrow articles from this place and a blog from this place and a video from this place and create the content for the student to consume, rather than just depend on a single textbook that goes, in a linear, the textbook may be great, but it may not be exactly what we want or need, right? We may need to be very selective and very specific and find additional OERs to supplement the textbook. So yeah, that's and the ebooks for sure, Chris.
Most, just adding to Chris's comment, most textbook publishers nowadays will let you just select the portions of the text that you want. So I would definitely ask your textbook publisher, you know, if you're not in a position to look for OER, open educational resources, you're dependent on that textbook, definitely go push the publisher and say, hey, I'd like just this content. And I'd like it to be integrated with Canvas, and I'm sure they can do that for you. Every textbook publisher I know on the planet can do that. And they usually offer it for a lot less money.
Yep. There's a lot of cool things that they're doing now that make it more integrated into online learning. So thanks, Terry, for adding that. Okay. Go ahead. Somebody's speaking. Dylan.
I was just going to say that one of the things that I've seen students express a lot of like value from is from like if I have like a weekly discussion, something like that, commenting briefly throughout the week. But if I just kind of synopsize what I've seen at the end of the week or the beginning of the next week regarding themes and questions and things like that, and spend like 5 minutes and just create a video addressing some of their questions that they've raised throughout discussion, or some of the points of interest regarding the reading, like if it doesn't necessarily go into depth on a particular subject that the students seem to express more interest about, and kind of explore some of that they've noted a lot of value from that. So I've actually like taken what they're saying, discussing themselves, and then reiterate that back to them and expand upon it. Yeah. They've demonstrated that they like that.
Yeah, that goes a long way at building that sense of community and trust between you and the learner and the professor as well. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. I think we're ready to kind of workshop. We actually, and we're going to continue this discussion, but now we want you guys to think about, and Sarah, I'll go to the next page. We kind of let you explain this, but we want you to continue doing this, but we're going to break up into sessions now. So why don't you explain, Sarah, while I'm looking at the tech to make it work.
So to give you opportunity to maybe cater this a little bit more specifically to your own needs and be able to discuss, we're going to break into groups and breakout rooms, and we have the various resources in the link to the folder, and we'd like you to talk about and share your challenges that are specific and a new active learning that you want to try, maybe give you an opportunity to talk through that and get some feedback from your peers.
Yeah. So Terry, I'm going to need help because when I click on the more button, I'm not seeing break up into groups. So, but perhaps you can. I'm still not able to break people into groups, even though I'm a co-host here. So. Are you seeing it? And if it doesn't tend to work, if that doesn't work, then we can do a whole group session, but we really wanted to break into smaller groups. I feel like it would just be better.
Huck, I just made you the host. Try that now.
All right, let's see what happens here. Let's see, share computer, optimize screen, video panel, flow, meeting, names, disable. Breakout rooms. Thank you, Terry. I'm gonna do 3 breakout rooms. It's just gonna be random. And we may end up just ending the session beyond at that point. Really, we want you to just talk about it. We may try to bring you back in like the last minute to just show you our concluding page. I will share again this folder, this folder of resources in the Zoom chat so that you can pull those up and use them as well. So here we go. And hey, Janet, how's it going?
I was thinking about my days teaching as well, and while we're waiting for the rest of the people to come back in, and so I found that when I really got a really big hook, a really strong attention getter at the beginning of the course, that often helped students engage at the beginning of the course, and it helped them motivate them throughout the rest of the course. But I think that is an ongoing question, and the pandemic has highlighted that question of getting students engaged and motivated to do the coursework. Got about 2 minutes.
Yep. All right. Well, we have pretty much accomplished what we were hoping to accomplish here. Just a little list for you to read through before we finish. And I do have a little feedback thing at the very end that I'll go to for those of you who are still part of the Pear Deck. Just hoping that this helped. Of course, we don't have time to actually come as a group now and have everybody share anymore. And I apologize for just not having that time. But if you want to continue having these conversations, then just continue having them with each other after the meeting, with us. Reach out to us at CTL or at DSU Online. Talk to your peers.
We may have time for one burning, if anyone has a burning desire to share something that has worked really well, or a burning desire to share an idea, please do.
Does anybody feel like they wanted to share?
I've got one that we talked about a little bit. Like, how do you balance, and I think Sarah, I believe it was Sarah, had a good answer, but I was just curious about everyone else's thoughts. How do you balance unique or different assignment types or content and things like that with the consistency of having particular deliverables or assignment types, so that you can develop particular behaviors or skill sets that you're looking to create with the students? So if I can phrase this better, how do you balance consistency of assignments and consistency of certain delivery to encourage certain skills of behavior versus the variety that's required or necessary sometimes to keep students engaged?
It's a really good question. Did anybody have any thoughts on that before? I mean, we're all teachers. We all can talk quite a bit, I'm sure, but I always have words.
And that variety is key. I keep thinking it's great to have another set of eyes. I think that's why we get together. That's why we consult with our peers. We walk down the hall to say, hey, do you have any ideas for doing this differently? We consult with a learning designer to see if they have any ideas. That's my thought immediately.
Yeah, I mean, think about, so that structure is so important, right? Because if you have structure, then you're reducing cognitive load for your students, right? Like, they can accomplish the activities or the assignments because they've done it before, or because it's structured and consistent from week to week. They're doing the same thing. So you only have to train them one time. And yet there's very unique and very specialized assignments that would probably benefit the students to do. And then you'll have to spend time training them on how to accomplish it, or it kind of breaks the flow of the course, if you will, right? Is that am I understanding your question, Dylan? Oh wait, he dropped out. Darn.
I'm still here.
There you are. Oh, there, you just moved. Okay.
No, yeah, essentially, but my thought process is more along the lines of and I guess my context is largely right now I'm teaching master's students, so I'm looking to create specific professional level behaviors, which I guess is not unique, but I'm looking to create specific professional behaviors, whether that's like a growth mindset, whether that's continuous professional development or continuous learning, or how to evaluate and reinterpret research and apply research. And so I'm looking to create specific behaviors that they will apply across the continuum of their career. And so that's why I like some of the consistency of it, because I can reinforce that behavioral pattern. But then how do I keep that interesting and engaging?
The question of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A big question.
You might try, Dylan, you might try kind of let's try this and see what happens, and then ask for feedback from students. That keeps them involved in, well, it shows them, it gives them a voice. And then if you make adjustments within your course presentation to reflect that input from students, then that shows that you're listening, and it increases their engagement because they feel that they've gained a level of importance in the whole process over the course of the semester. But not all students gravitate to that. Whether it's defensive on their part, maybe they're more introverted or whatever it might be. One of the beauties of in-class face-to-face is everybody is engaged in whatever's happening at the moment. But online is asynchronous, generally speaking. And so students are entering and leaving throughout the course of, say, a week. So what is successful on a Monday may not be successful on those students who attend by Thursday or something like that. It's a logistics issue, I think. But I like the idea myself of asking for students guidance in how to proceed. And when they offer suggestions along those lines, it's revealing that this is what they need. All right, and you may not have anticipated that ahead of time. And so to make that adjustment reinforces their involvement on a continuing basis. And other students who are more reticent can see this happening and are encouraged to participate because they're not being judged or evaluated based on that participation. So I don't know, it's a very complex process, and I think it's just changing all the time.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a great idea to involve students in the process. And Bill and I do recommend as well that you consult with a learning designer. Any last words? We're past time, but any final words, Sarah or Huck, on this presentation?
Just thank you guys so much. I made a good experience for me as well. So.
Yeah, thank you. I learned from you guys as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for taking the time to attend, and thank you especially to Huck and Sarah for facilitating the workshop.
Okay.
And we'll see you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The opportunity.
Take care.
Thank you, Terry.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks so much, Huck and Sarah. You did a great job.
Thank you, Terry.
Sorry, I invited the burning question at the end. I probably should have let it in.
Oh, it's all good. I'm glad you did. I didn't know if we would even be allowed to go over, but since you were the one that was facilitating it, I kind of let you just take it. And I'm really glad that Dylan asked that question. I still don't have a good answer for him, but I really like Dennis's answer. So that was good.
Yeah, good question. Good answers. But thank you so much. Huck, you're the host, so I don't know if the recording continued, but I assume you can stop.
It does say it is recording still. So I will hit the end button and we will adjourn.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys. Excellent job. Really well done.